Good afternoon and happy Labor Day for many folks. I've decided that in order to better prepare my students for class, that not only do I continue to write relevant blogs and use those blogs as a lot of the basis for what I'm teaching, but I'm going to go and start adding really short video clips that go along with the blog to help explain to my students why I wrote the blog and the purpose behind it. So let's get started with a series of blogs I started this past week that's based on an MIT report that talked about why these AI projects are failing. Now I know that some people are saying it was just clickbait and et cetera, and, but there's some really important nuggets in here. The ones that really jumped out at me was the point that 95% of organizations are getting zero return. Now there's a lot of good reasons for that. There's a lot of organizations are still in the piloting phase. They're still playing, still trying to figure out. Some are still trying to figure out how serious they get about this. I think a real major part of the challenge and why it's only such a small percent have really started to extract value out of this thing. The key word, of course, is the word value, is that they're not focused just on productivity improvements. I mean, writing better newsletters, capturing notes from meetings, those are all kind of nice things to have, but they don't provide differentiation to the organization. And what we need to do is understand what is it the organization is trying to accomplish. In fact, what I say is if you want to extract value using these AI tools, and the conversation needs to start by focusing on value. And I think that there are three questions that everybody needs to ask before they start diving right into this AI journey. Number one, what matters most to the organization? That is, what are the business and operational priorities that are necessary to drive decisions and measurable actions and outcomes, right? It's what's most important to the organization. I like to look at things from a 12 to 16 month window. That is, what is the organization trying to accomplish from a business or operational perspective over the next 12 to 16 months? I find that anything that's beyond 16 months tends to fall into this category of science experiment. And we're beyond science experiment, folks. These technologies work and they're delivering value. So question number one is, what matters most to the organization? That is, what is of value that the organization is trying to achieve? Number two, what does success look like? I talk about this in the Thinking Like a Data Scientist methodology about understanding the desired outcomes, right? If this is our initiative, what we're trying to accomplish, what does good look like? What are our desired outcomes? And looking at that across a wide range of stakeholders and constituents to build a very robust set of desired outcomes we want to generate for the use of AI to drive value to the organization. And the last point is, how are we going to measure success? Like, what are the KPIs and metrics that we're going to use to measure outcomes effectiveness? If we can't measure it, there's no guarantee it's ever going to happen. In fact, we won't know how to drive it to success if we don't know how to drive that. So the report and the entire series starts off with this framing. It says, if you want to leverage AI to deliver value, by golly, you got to start the conversation by focusing what's valuable to your organization, right? Spend the time to your organization, not what someone like me is getting value from, which can be a provocative little push, a little nudge, but it must be what's important to your organization. Then once we get going, I talk about, this is what comes from my upcoming book, The AI Human Advantage, AI Human Edge, which talks about how we're going to take these AI technologies like agentic AI and generative AI and large language models, and we're going to leverage causal AI. Causal AI to me is the secret sauce. It's the magic elixir that allows us to deliver outcomes that are more meaningful, more relevant, more transparent, and consequently more actionable. And so instead of feeding our language models with just a generic bunch of data, I actually want to go through the process of building out propensity models on each and every one of my key entities. And those entity models are going to be comprised of critical analytic propensity scores. For example, in this first blog, we start talking about reducing fall risks in hospitals and healthcare facilities, right? Patient falls is a serious problem for a lot of hospitals and healthcare facilities. It obviously impacts the patient. They get hurt, they break their hips, there's surgery, they get sued, there's additional costs. All kinds of bad things happen on falls. And so let's say, as for example, we're trying to figure out how to reduce falls and building very detailed predicted propensity models using causal AI on each and every patient to know which patient is most likely to fall in what sort of situations, and then leveraging that I call these intelligence technologies of genetic AI and generative AI and such to help us provide the contextual perspective of where they are in the hospital, what kind of treatment they're getting, all the immediacy that I can use and compare that allows me to build this full loop service built around these learning constructs to build these fall propensity models that continuously learn and adapt as the patients experience, what works and what doesn't work. And then I tie this back to the thinking like a data scientist methodology. Of course, everything comes back for me to that. That's the backbone of driving a collaborative conversation around value creation. And so what happens in the very first two steps of the thinking like a data scientist methodology is we first off understand the business and operational goals around reduced patient falls. And then the second phase is we turn all the subject matter experts, the nurses, the doctors, the administrators, the patients themselves, their family, into AI engineers and gather all those KPIs and metrics and desired outcomes that are going to be foundational for us to build our AI models that are going to predict and help us predict when falls likely to happen so we can take action to prevent that. Last point is that this first blog only sets up this first part of the session, right? Assessing the business initiative, understanding and harvesting the stakeholder expertise, the subject matter expert, turn them into AI engineers, understanding the business entities, which in this case is the patient, but it's also the nurses, the doctors, the technicians, and the treatments, and then basically working across all of that to figure out use cases that can help me or actionable actions, the steps I can take to help address that. That is what we're going to do on our path to build a fall risk propensity score. And the second part, which will come out in the second part of the blog, will focus on how we're actually going to build that, how we're going to brainstorm the propensity models, how we're going to identify the ML features, what kind of analytic algorithms are we going to do, how are we going to make sure those algorithms can be used by the frontline employees, stakeholders, and then creating this continuous learning and adapting user experience. So that's where we're going to go. This is the first one, sets the stage, brings together the idea that we know we have a challenge with generative AI. You just can't throw it out there and expect value to come. There's no easy button with generative AI, but it's a very powerful tool when you frame the problem well, when you understand what you're trying to accomplish, and then you use the combination of causal AI, these intelligence technologies, and these learning frameworks to help build models that continuously learn and adapt. Anyway, thanks for your time, and watch this space for the second part of this blog series. And if you find this useful, put in comments, yeah, useful. If it's not useful, say, not useful. But, my primary audience is my students, and sometimes I look at everybody out there as being kind of my students. Anyway, thanks for your time, and keep watching me on this space.